Yo, what's good, y'all? Kanji Mono here. Long time no see. School is over, and with that, finally leaves me with enough time to really focus in on YouTube. So expect me to post much more frequently and put out more in-depth videos in the future. With that being said, though, in today's video, like the title suggests, I'm gonna go over my personal pet peeves that I have with the NBA media community as a whole. Now, if you don't know what a pet peeve is, it is essentially something that a particular person finds especially annoying. So something like flies and mosquitoes in the summer, gaslighters, or people who chew gum really loud. Just something that particularly annoys you. Now keep in mind, with this video, I'm obviously going to have some takes that may be involved with some of your favorite players or fan bases, and it may seem like I'm trying to strike on them, or that I'm trying to actively go out and hate on them. While that might be partially true, the main point of this video is just to be blunt and address what personally annoys me. So with that being said, let's get on to our first pet peeve. Now with this point, it boils my blood sometimes, but what I essentially mean by this statement is, let's take a player like Zach LaVine for example. Throughout the regular season, people wouldn't classify him as a top 5 shooting guard in the league, call him washed even though he's continuously developed his game throughout the year and has become better, and overall just leave Zach under the radar. Until trade rumors start going by, free agency is about to start getting crazy, and sketchy articles about the player being unhappy and unsatisfied start to go into fruition. And then all of a sudden, Zach becomes this underrated 3-level scorer, highly skilled top 5 shooting guard in the league who once averaged 27 on 50, 40, 85 splits. My point with this example is that people don't give the right recognition towards a player until they become relevant to your argument or team of liking. Why are you all of a sudden gassing up Zach right now in free agency when throughout the entire season you wouldn't even bat an eye towards him, and when arguments of who's the best shooting guards in the league or who's the best slashers in the league, you completely disregard the player for the other big star names in the league. This isn't even a problem with just Zach, but I see it with players like D'Angelo Russell, pre-Lakers trade, Fred VanVleet, Jordan Clarkson, Darius Garland, and etc. Not gonna lie, it's mostly Lakers fans and other delusional big market team fan bases like the Heat or Celtics who do this, just because they're so clouded in their head that they don't actually watch basketball games but go off what the media says. But yeah, this shit just agitates me, and when I see one of those type of fans project that fake love towards a player that they barely support in the long run, man, it just gets me upset. But let's get on to our second take. Now at this point, it's definitely going to ruffle a few feathers. Just to make it clear, I am not saying the players that I refer to in this portion are bad or even overrated. I'm just saying that there is a certain stigma among these players that are misleading and disingenuous in my opinion. With all that being said, the gist of this point is that just because someone doesn't get talked about as much doesn't mean they're underrated. What I mean by this point is, let's take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for example. Sure, he doesn't get talked about as often as some other big name players in his caliber, but that doesn't mean he is underrated necessarily, because the mass NBA audience knows of Shai's value and how good he actually is, especially this season. The definition of underrated means you think the general opinion about it is lower value than it should be. And with Shai, a good majority of the NBA fan base knows about him and knows his value, but just doesn't talk about him as much. So I guess in an aspect he is technically underrated, but when it comes to the most underrated players in the league, Shai should be nowhere in that conversation. The reason why this is a pet peeve of mine is because the bigger name players like Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Shai always seem to overshadow much of the real underrated players like OG, Alfred Sengun, and Jeremy Grant, because in reality, those are the players that really should be given their flowers and more recognition when you have those types of conversations. But with that being said, let's get on to my final pet peeve. Now with this take, I think every individual player fan base is guilty of, whether it be bronze sexuals using Jordan 1 and 9 before Scotty argument, which clearly lacks context, or Jordan meat writers being hypocritical and using LeBron's 4 and 6 finals record as a detriment to LeBron's case, or it's using the plumber and milkman argument against Willie Bill, using the carried by Shaq narrative against Kobe, or the filler rings argument against Duncan. What I'm basically saying is that I hate when people of certain fan bases use false narratives and misconstrued lies just for the sake of their argument. It not only makes your argument much more weaker and less credible, but it's also just plain disrespectful and ignorant. You're going to meet right someone so badly, a person that probably doesn't know if you're existent, that you will intentionally use arguments out of context just to belittle another man that doesn't even know of your existence either. Instead of using basic, highly flawed, simple arguments for the person you're trying to oppose, make arguments in context so that it isn't easy for your antagonist to easily slam on. For example, if you want to argue against LeBron, bring up 2011, bring up his poor free throw shooting, bring up his lack of defensive intensity during the latter part of his career. If you want to argue against Jordan, bring up 1995, bring up the lack of three-point shot earlier in his career, and bring up the fact that the league at the time was much less competitive due to all the expansion teams that got brought up in this era. Honestly, anytime I see a person make baseless arguments like I mentioned at the start of my rant, I just automatically assume that they are a casual or that they really lack any sort of argument, thus having to go to those points. Main thing you should get from this portion is that when arguing, please just use good arguments, and if you're in a losing situation or don't really have much argument, please do not go to those fabricated arguments that have been dissected over and over again. So yeah, that's a few personal pet peeves I have with the NBA community. Now again, if this video offended your favorite fan base or player, just know, like I mentioned in the introduction, I don't generally despise any of the subjects that I've talked about negatively about in this video. I'm just pointing out a few annoying things that bother me in my opinion, and I hope you're able to see my point of view and understand where I'm coming from. But I'd like to know down below, what are your personal pet peeves you have with NBA media, and if you agreed or disagreed with some of my takes I said in the video. As per usual, continue to strive for greatness, and I'll see you on next video. Peace.